Hello, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World Talks. Poland's president says Germany should pay war reparations in order to build good bilateral relations with Warsaw. 86 after the outbreak of World War II, scars left by German and Russian terror still ignite the Polish political discourse. And to talk about it, we're joined by Aleks Szczerbiak, professor of political science at the University of Sussex. Good evening.
Good evening.
Let me quote Polish president. In order to build a partnership built on truth and good relations, we must deal with the issue of reparations from the German state, which, as Polish president, I unequivocally demand for the common good, stated Karol Nawrocki. Do you think that the German state will even give it a thought?
Well, they've made it very clear that they've considered the issue to be closed. But I think that by raising this issue, Mr. Nawrocki is doing it for a number of reasons. It's easy to see political calculations in everything, and he is a politician. But he genuinely believes that Germany hasn't had a proper reckoning with its past, and it's an issue that needs to be kept being raised. And I think most Poles will probably agree with him about that. But I think also beyond the kind of the legal question, there are questions about putting Germany on the defensive. He believes that Poland needs to be much more assertive in terms of advancing its interests with Germany, and he thinks this is a good issue to put Germany on the defensive. And it's also about putting the government on defensive, because the government doesn't want to raise this issue because it doesn't want to cause something that's going to cause awkward relations with the government. And however popular it knows this move is, it's one that it would really rather avoid. So I think, there are political motivations here, but also Mr. Nawrocki genuinely believes that Germany has not properly come to terms with its past in terms of what it did during the Second World War to Poland.
But is it wise to be conflicted with, well, basically all your major neighbors in the region? For obvious reasons, there's this huge conflict with Russia. Then again, President Nawrocki is not really a big supporter of Ukraine's war effort, and now he tries to antagonize Germany. Now, is it all smart?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure I would agree with you that he's not a supporter of the Ukrainian war effort. I think he's made it clear that he thinks that Poland should continue to provide military, diplomatic and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. He takes a different attitude to his predecessor on things like whether Ukraine should join NATO and the EU before things like historical issues are resolved. He also wants a much more transactional relationship with Ukraine. He thinks Poland needs to assert its interests much more clearly. And also, let's not forget the fact that there's actually an arrest warrant out against Mr. Nawrocki in Moscow. So I would say that he has a different approach, a more instrumental, a more transactional, a more Trumpian approach, if you like, to Ukraine. In terms of relations with Germany, well, obviously, Germany is a key ally of Poland's on many, many issues. But Mr. Nawrocki believes that there are issues where Poland and Germany clash. And in those where those issues do arise, Poland, again, he feels he needs to be much more assertive in terms of pushing forward its interests and building alliances which don't always include working with Germany. And the thing about the reparations issue and where this fits into this is because he feels that Germany has been able to present itself internationally as a kind of a moral superpower, if you like, a country that's dealt with its Nazi past in an exemplary way. But by raising the issue of reparations, he's making the case that where Germany has paid lip service to its Nazi past, it's obviously distanced itself from it, says it condemns it and doesn't want to repeat it, but has done so at a very low cost. It hasn't paid a penny of reparations to a country like Poland that was devastated. So it's about, I think, his feeling is that there are areas where Poland and Germany have different interests, and where they do, Poland needs to be much more assertive, and the issue of war reparations is an opportunity to actually put Germany on the defensive on an issue where it has presented itself as having dealt with it in an exemplary way.
But moral issues aside, can Germany even afford to compensate for war losses? Well, all these various European countries it invaded during World War II. Well, and what would such a precedent, if it indeed it wants to pay some war reparations to Poland, what it would lead to?
Yeah, well, I think that's part of the problem because I think that, once they kind of open the floodgates, once they start saying yes, because their line is very clear at the moment. They say that this issue has been dealt with legally, that, Poland withdrew its claim for reparations during the 1950s. And of course, the position of people like Mr. Nawrocki and those who call for reparations is that they say that this was done under duress. It wasn't a sovereign Polish government that made that decision. It was a government under Soviet influence. And therefore, there's not a kind of watertight case for it, never mind morally, where they would say that there clearly is. And of course, the problem for Germany is if they do concede on this, on the one hand, it's taking them off the moral high ground. It's admitting that maybe they haven't dealt with this issue in such an exemplary way as they say. On the other hand, it's, as you say, opening themselves up potentially to similar claims from other countries that were also victims of Nazi aggression. Of course, what Mr. Nawrocki would say and his supporters is, well, that's kind of Germany's problem, really. That's not Poland's problem. Poland's problem is that its economy was devastated. Millions of Poles died as a result of the conflict, and it deserves some sort of recompense for this. And if it was to be a proper recompense, they argue, in terms of the research they've done, it would be a very, very substantial one. The fact that it would be very, very costly to Germany, well, that's kind of their problem, they would say. Although, of course, as you say, that makes it very, very difficult for them to realistically give any way on this line. And I would say it's probably very unlikely that they're going to.
Mm-hmm. Well, it all happened 80 years ago. Now, is it wise to build your political agenda on the sort of historical resentment, right? Well, it is possible. We can observe it on the very example of Russia, right, which tries to rebuild its empire taken apart by all the various nations. At least that's Putin's narrative. But doesn't it always lead to some sort of that firstly you lie to your society, and secondly it may lead to war, basically?
I don't think there's much prospect of war breaking out between Poland and Germany, although there can be better and worse relations. You're obviously right in terms of whether this issue is raised or not. I think the reason that this is relevant, in spite of the fact that it happened a long time ago, is that Germany, in terms of its kind of international cultural diplomacy, has really played this card that it's dealt with its Nazi legacy really well. Okay, in a sense, I think people like Mr. Nawrocki and Law and Justice, I think they kind of admire Germany really in the sense of how they've done this. One example of this is, somebody once said every German who ever opposed Hitler has had a film made about them. Whether it's The White Rose, Oskar Schindler, whether it's somebody like Stauffenberg, who actually was very sympathetic to Hitler, but simply thought he was going to win them the war. And they contrast that with the fact that there is a lack of knowledge of how Poland suffered during the war. Lots of people have heard of Oskar Schindler. How many people have heard of someone like Irena Sendler, for example, who, Polish resistance fighters saved the lives of thousands of Jewish children at much greater risk than somebody like Oskar Schindler took, was taken prisoner, tortured, didn't betray anybody. But because of their historical policy, because of their cultural diplomacy, the Germans are very, very good at actually getting their side across, if you like. And I think that's really important. In terms of soft power, it is really important. And that's one of the reasons why, as I say, regardless of whether there's a legal case here and whether you actually think there's any chance of getting any money, I think in terms of soft power, in terms of partly putting Germany on the back foot, but also making sure that more people are aware of the victimhood that Poland had during the Second World War, I think that this is what this is about. And I think, you can underestimate the extent to which historical policy plays a critical role in terms of international cultural diplomacy. So whether, as I say, I'm quite dubious whether there's actually any chance of success of this, but undoubtedly, it's not simply just reopening the past. I think that there is an agenda here which is about the present day and about advancing Poland's interests and indeed Mr. Nawrocki's interests and those of his political formation in the present day.
Leslie, I have a rather philosophical question to you. We're talking on the 86th anniversary of the outbreak of World War II. And after it came to an end, Europeans decided to never let it happen again. But the memory of the atrocities has clearly evaporated, as we can see, the continent is on fire again. Why is Russia, which lost huge numbers of people during World War II, is so eager to shed blood again?
Well, I'm not a philosopher. I'm a political scientist, so I'll have to kind of, not give a perfect answer on that. But I mean, first of all, I think that the memory of the war and of the great patriotic victory is absolutely critical in terms of the legitimation of the Putin regime. And I think moving on from that, the idea of a kind of a military conflict in which Russia is reasserting itself as a geopolitical force, which, if necessary, is prepared to use military power in order to assert itself and defend its interests, is absolutely critical to that. And that's the key, if you like, to the Putin project. Vladimir Putin said that the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. And here he wasn't talking about Marxism-Leninism, which I don't think he's a particular fan of or would want to go back to. He's talking about the idea of Russia, at that time through the guise of the Soviet Union, as a regional and world superpower with the ability to project itself militarily, rooted in that great patriotic myth of the great patriotic war victory over Germany. So these things, I think, are all of a piece. The war record, Russia's self-presented role in terms of defeating Nazi Germany, rebuilding Russia as a geopolitical force and a world power, and its preparedness to intervene militarily, as it has done in Ukraine, and indeed in many other occasions in Georgia and Chechnya before that.
Aleks Szczerbiak, Professor of Political Science at the University of Sussex, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching, and stay with us for much more interviews, news and other features here on TVP World.